There is a quiet turning point in the life of an empath. It does not arrive with noise. It does not come with a dramatic speech, a slammed door, or a final fight. It comes softly, almost invisibly. One day they stop choosing chaos that looked like connection, and they start choosing peace that comes from inner strength. That is the real shift. Not coldness, not rejection, not becoming hard. It is the moment they stop living in emotional survival mode and begin living with emotional control. For a long time, the empath has carried a sensitivity that feels like both a gift and a weight. They walk into a room and feel everything. A change in tone, a pause that lasts 1 second too long, the look on someone's face before they say they are fine. Their mind keeps reading the room, always scanning, always sensing, always translating what other people feel before those people even say a word. But here is the part many never notice. That sharp awareness of others often grows much faster than awareness of self. The empath learns to read everyone else early. Their own needs come later, sometimes much later. Then the awakening begins, quietly, usually through exhaustion. Stay with this, because this is where everything starts to change. They notice that after certain conversations, their body feels heavy. After certain relationships, their mind feels loud. They replay moments again and again, thinking about what they should have said, what they should have fixed, what they somehow failed to repair, even when the damage was never theirs to carry. Slowly, a new question appears in the middle of all that mental noise. Not what are they feeling? Not what do they need? But what am I feeling right now? That question changes everything. It turns their attention inward. It gives their own emotional world value. It reminds them that their inner state also deserves care. As this awareness grows, the empath starts seeing patterns they once called love, kindness, or loyalty. They notice how often they prepare for someone else's needs before checking in with themselves. They see how quickly they step in to calm tension, soften silence, or rescue a mood that was never theirs to manage. What once looked automatic now starts to look expensive. Their empathy, which used to feel noble, begins to feel like emotional overreach. This is the moment they realize that feeling deeply is not the problem. Living with no boundary around those feelings is. Their nervous system has been running for too long, always alert, always trying to prevent conflict, disappointment, or distance. Even in quiet moments, some part of them is still scanning for danger, still preparing, still bracing. And now they can finally name it. What looked like kindness was sometimes conditioning. What looked like care was sometimes fear. What looked like devotion was sometimes a habit built from survival. That insight hits deep. It does not make the empath selfish, it makes them honest. They begin separating compassion from responsibility. They begin learning the difference between understanding someone's pain and carrying it on their back. Those are not the same thing. They never were. And when that truth lands, the guilt that once followed every boundary begins to weaken. Not all at once, but little by little. They stop asking how much they can endure for love, and they start asking whether the connection is aligned with who they are becoming. That is a powerful shift. It is not dramatic, but it is real. It is not loud, but it changes the entire direction of their life. Keep listening, because this is where the empath starts moving from emotional overload into emotional clarity. And once clarity arrives, some old patterns can never fully return. Loyalty has always lived close to the heart of the empath. They stay when others walk away. They defend people who would never defend them. They keep forgiving long after the apologies disappear. On the surface, this can look beautiful, and sometimes it is. But over time, the empath begins to see the hidden cost. They are often the one listening, but rarely the one truly heard. They become the safe place for everyone else, while their own feelings are brushed aside, delayed, or misunderstood. This is where a hard truth enters. Loyalty without mutual care becomes self-loss. That truth hurts at first. It can even feel wrong, because the empath is used to measuring love by endurance, by how much they can hold, by how much they can survive without closing their heart. But now something inside them starts to shift. They begin to understand that real loyalty is not staying through every kind of dysfunction. It is not proving devotion by tolerating emotional imbalance. It is not love when one person keeps giving and the other keeps taking. Healthy connection needs respect. It needs effort from both sides. It needs safety, honesty, and room for both people to exist. So the empath starts doing something unfamiliar. They pause before saying yes. They stop agreeing right away just to keep the peace. They let themselves say, I need time. They let themselves say, that does not work for me. At first, even simple boundaries feel heavy. Their body may react like they are doing something wrong, but discomfort is not always danger. Sometimes it is growth. Sometimes it is the nervous system learning a new language. And that language says this: my limits matter too. Watch closely because this is one of the biggest changes of all. The empath starts observing who respects their boundaries and who resists them. That reaction becomes information. It reveals more than words ever did. Patterns become clear. And once the empath sees those patterns, they can no longer pretend not to. Peace becomes even more real when the empath begins to understand what stress has been doing to the body. Emotional sensitivity is not just a thought pattern. It lives in the nerves, the muscles, the breath, the chest, the stomach, the pulse. The body remembers what the mind tries to explain away. Long exposure to tension, mood swings, emotional unpredictability, or constant drama keeps the stress system switched on. The heart stays slightly raised, the shoulders stay tight, sleep becomes shallow, rest stops feeling like rest. Over time, this state starts to feel normal, even when it is draining life from the inside. Then a new awareness appears. The empath begins to notice how different people affect the body. Some leave them calm, open, and steady. Others leave them tired, foggy, uneasy, or tense. Before, they may have ignored those signals and tried to reason through them. Now they stop dismissing what the body is saying. A headache after one conversation, a wave of fatigue after another, restlessness before seeing someone who always brings chaos. These are not random reactions. They are messages. They are information. They are truth speaking through the nervous system. This changes the empath's choices in quiet but powerful ways. They begin spending more time in places that feel grounded. They step back from people who live in conflict. They choose silence over endless stimulation. They protect sleep. They protect solitude. They protect the small routines that bring their body back to safety. What once looked like withdrawal starts to feel like regulation. What once felt selfish starts to feel necessary. And here comes another important shift. The empath starts releasing the idea that they must calm every emotional storm around them. They stop believing they are responsible for everyone's peace but their own. They begin stepping back, not from love but from overfunctioning, not from care but from control. In that space, something beautiful happens. Calm stops feeling strange. It starts feeling natural. And the empath realizes that peace is not emptiness. It is safety inside the self. One of the deepest signs of growth is how quietly the empath begins to detach from what keeps disturbing their inner world. There is no revenge in it. No need to punish. No need to make a scene. In earlier seasons of life, they may have tried to explain themselves again and again, hoping that enough honesty would finally create understanding. They spoke carefully. They over-explained. They defended their feelings. They justified their limits. They tried to make their heart easy for others to accept. But maturity brings a difficult realization. Not everyone wants to understand. Some people only want access. Some only want comfort. Some benefit from confusion because confusion keeps the empath available. That realization changes the way they use their energy. They stop asking how to fix every connection. They start asking whether the connection still matches the person they are becoming. That question becomes a filter. And once that filter is active, everything begins to look different. The empath no longer feels the need to dramatize an ending. They do not need a final war to prove they are done. They simply begin to withdraw their emotional labor. They stop carrying the whole conversation. They shorten the calls that only drain them. They decline invitations that feel forced. They stop rushing to rescue every misunderstanding. Their absence becomes the boundary. And yes, there is grief in this. Deep grief. Empaths invest with their whole heart. Letting go can feel like tearing through memory, history, and the future they once imagined. But this time, they let themselves feel that sadness without turning it into guilt. They do not confuse mourning with a sign to return. That is a major shift. It means they are no longer using pain as proof that a connection should continue. Listen closely. This part matters. Closure does not always come through confrontation. Sometimes closure is internal. Sometimes it is the calm decision to stop reaching for what keeps hurting you. And that kind of calm is not weakness. It is power. For much of their life, the empath's identity may have been tied to being needed. They were the peacemaker, the midnight listener, the one who sensed pain before anyone else did and rushed to soften it. Over time, that role became bigger than behavior. It became identity. Their worth started to feel connected to their usefulness. If someone was hurting, they showed up. If someone was falling apart, they became steady. If someone needed saving, they stepped in without being asked. It felt natural. It felt loving. But it also slowly taught them to disappear inside other people's needs. Then one day, a new question rises from the silence. Who am I when nobody needs me to fix them? That question can shake the ground. Because without crisis, without emotional labor, without the constant pull of other people's pain, there is space. And in that space, the empath begins meeting parts of themselves they left waiting for years. Creativity, curiosity, rest, desire, ambition, joy that does not come from rescuing anyone. They start seeing how often their own goals were delayed because someone else always needed immediate attention. They see how often they shaped their personality to fit the emotional climate around them. They softened when others were fragile. They shrank when others were insecure. They adapted so well that authenticity became blurred. Now that begins to change. The empath stops shapeshifting to keep everyone comfortable. They speak their preferences without checking every face in the room. They pursue what lights them up without asking how it will be useful to someone else. That is not selfishness. It is self-return. It is the slow rebuilding of identity from the inside out. And as that identity grows stronger, so does self-respect. The empath starts valuing themselves for more than caregiving. Empathy remains part of them, yes, but it is no longer the only way they know how to matter. This is where confidence begins. Quietly, steadily, not through applause, not through outside approval, but through alignment, through becoming someone whose choices finally reflect their own soul. As this inner change settles in, the empath's relationships start changing too, not because they are trying to become distant or superior, not because they suddenly think they are above anyone. It happens because their emotional pattern has changed. Their standards rise without needing to be announced. In the past, they may have mistaken intensity for depth, strong emotions, fast attachment, heavy vulnerability, constant need. It all felt meaningful because it felt powerful. But now something different feels more valuable. Consistency, calm, clear words, steady effort, emotional responsibility. These things start feeling deeper than chaos ever did. The empath stops being pulled toward people who confuse unpredictability with passion. They no longer see emotional mess as proof of connection. Instead, they notice who can communicate honestly, who respects a boundary without turning it into a punishment, who can sit in silence without making it heavy, who can disagree without making love feel threatened. That is a different kind of closeness, a healthier one. And because the empath is no longer over-explaining, over-giving, or over-functioning, certain people naturally begin to drift away. Those who depended on endless access start losing interest when access has limits. Those who fed on emotional labor stop feeling fed. This is not failure. It is sorting. It is alignment in motion. And what begins to remain or slowly enters is different. Relationships that feel balanced. Conversations that do not leave a headache behind. Bonds that do not need one person to carry the weight for both. The empath also becomes less reactive. Instead of absorbing someone else's mood, they notice it. Instead of rushing to soothe every insecurity, they allow space. They trust others to face their own emotions. That changes everything. Because now connection is built on two whole people standing beside each other, not one person disappearing so the other can feel held. This is important, so do not miss it. The empath does not lose the ability to care. They simply stop caring in ways that cost them their center. There is a special kind of strength in the moment. An empath stops confusing being available with being loving. For years, they may have believed that always being there was proof of a pure heart. Always answering, always listening, always understanding, always making room. But eventually they see the trap. Unlimited access is not the same as intimacy. Constant emotional giving is not the same as real connection. Sometimes it is only a pattern that trains people to expect your energy without honoring your humanity. That is when the empath begins to reclaim one of the most sacred words in emotional growth. No, a simple word, a short word. But for someone used to pleasing, soothing, adjusting, and explaining, it can feel enormous. At first, saying no may shake the body. It may bring guilt. It may bring fear of rejection. It may even bring silence from people who only liked the version of the empath that never had limits. But that reaction teaches something important. Anyone who only values your softness when it costs you is not loving your heart. They are using your access. And once the empath sees that, even once, they cannot fully unsee it. So they begin protecting their time, protecting their peace, protecting the moments that refill rather than drain them. They stop answering every crisis. They stop making themselves the emergency room for everyone else's feelings. They begin trusting that adults can sit with discomfort without needing to hand it over. This does not make the empath unkind. It makes them wise. It means they finally understand that support should come from choice, not pressure. Care should come from love, not fear. Presence should be shared, not demanded. Here is the quiet miracle in all of this. The more the empath honors their own limits, the more their energy begins to return. Their mind becomes clearer. Their body becomes lighter. Their heart becomes less crowded. They feel more like themselves. And for someone who spent years disappearing into everyone else, that feeling is almost holy. It is not loud, but it changes everything from the inside. Another part of this transformation is learning that not every emotion needs action. This is a lesson the empath rarely hears early enough. Because when you feel everything deeply, your first instinct is often to respond, to help, to explain, to repair, to hold, to prevent pain before it spreads. But growth teaches restraint, not cold restraint, wise restraint. The empath begins to notice that some feelings are not invitations. They are simply information. Someone else's anger is information. Their disappointment is information. Their silence is information. It does not always mean the empath must enter, fix, soften, or translate. This is a radical shift in the inner world. Instead of jumping into emotional movement the second they sense tension, they pause. They breathe. They observe. They let the moment exist without making it their job. That pause becomes powerful. In that pause, they begin distinguishing what belongs to them from what belongs to someone else. That skill creates freedom. It breaks the old bond between sensitivity and self-abandonment. It also brings a new kind of calm into conversations. The empath no longer feels forced to fill every silence or solve every discomfort. They can stay present without becoming responsible. They can care without absorbing. They can love without losing shape. That is maturity. And it often changes the way others respond too. Some people will rise when the empath stops overcarrying. Others will reveal that they never planned to carry themselves at all. Both outcomes are useful. Both reveal truth. Keep this in your mind. The empath is not becoming less loving. They are becoming more rooted, more selective, more conscious. They are learning that emotional depth is not measured by how much pain they can hold. It is measured by how clearly they can stay connected to themselves while feeling the world around them. That is a different kind of power, a quieter one, but it lasts longer. And unlike the old pattern, it does not leave them empty at the end of the day. It leaves them steady. It leaves them clear. It leaves them whole. As peace becomes the new standard, the empath starts trusting patterns more than promises. This changes the way they choose people. Words still matter, yes, but words alone no longer hypnotize them. They pay attention to behavior, to consistency, to emotional accountability, to the small, repeated things that reveal a person's true character over time. In the past, they may have chased potential. They saw pain and called it depth. They saw damage and called it complexity. They saw inconsistency and hoped love would steady it. But now they move differently. They no longer build futures out of someone's possible growth while ignoring their current pattern. They stop romanticizing what repeatedly hurts them. They stop giving endless chances to people who keep showing the same wound in a different outfit. This is not bitterness. It is discernment, and discernment protects peace. The empath also begins to trust slowness. They no longer rush to attach just because someone is intense, expressive, or emotionally open too early. They let time reveal truth. They let actions speak. They let reality breathe. That patience becomes protection. It keeps them from getting pulled into the old cycle where emotional intensity creates false closeness, and false closeness creates deep exhaustion. Now they know better. Real connection is not loud in the beginning and empty in the end. Real connection grows through steadiness, through truth, through people who can remain kind without needing you to carry them, through people who can stand next to your heart without trying to live inside it. And the empath feels the difference. They feel it in the body, in the breath, in the lack of confusion after the conversation ends, in the absence of that old familiar heaviness. That matters more than they once knew, because peace is not just about who is absent from your life. It is also about who is allowed near your mind, your body, your energy, and your future. When the empath understands that, their choices become cleaner, simpler, stronger. They stop chasing what shines. They start choosing what is steady. And that choice, repeated enough times, rebuilds an entire life. In the end, when an empath chooses peace over people, they do not become empty, cold, or alone. They become aligned. That is the real outcome. They are no longer surrounded by those who only need to be rescued. They are no longer trapped in roles that reward self-erasure. They are no longer proving love by suffering in silence. Instead, they begin creating a life where compassion still exists, but it stands beside self-respect. A life where tenderness is protected by wisdom. A life where care is offered freely, not extracted through guilt. This is the part many misunderstand. The empath does not stop loving deeply. They simply stop loving in ways that destroy them. They stop making other people's storms the center of their identity. They stop handing out access to their inner world just because someone asks. They stop calling exhaustion loyalty. They stop calling anxiety intuition when it is really their body begging for distance. And in that new clarity, a different future opens. One with calmer relationships, cleaner energy, better decisions, more room to breathe, more room to create, more room to hear their own voice without it being buried under the noise of everyone else's needs. If you have felt this shift happening inside you, then you already know. It is quiet. It is personal. It is not always visible from the outside, but it is real. And once it begins, life starts to reorganize around what protects your peace instead of what demands your sacrifice. That is not selfish. That is wisdom earned through experience. That is what happens when sensitivity finally meets self-respect. The empath rises not by becoming harder, but by becoming clearer. Not by caring less, but by carrying less. Not by shutting the heart, but by guarding it with truth. And that may be the most powerful change of all. The moment they stop choosing chaos dressed as connection and start choosing peace that feels like home, they do not lose themselves. They finally return to themselves,